On February 14, 2019, a routine winter patrol over Washington's North Cascades would become anything but routine for helicopter crew N-47. The three-person team consisted of pilot Jake Morrison, a 15-year veteran with over 8,000 flight hours in mountain terrain, flight medic Lily Chu, certified in wilderness emergency medicine, and park ranger Tom Bradley, who had spent 12 years patrolling the remote wilderness areas of the Pacific Northwest. The morning briefing indicated clear skies with temperatures hovering around 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind conditions were favorable at 8 miles per hour from the southwest. The crew's mission was standard: conduct aerial surveillance of backcountry areas, check on registered climbing parties, and maintain visual contact with emergency beacons from solo hikers who had filed permits for the Valentine's Day weekend. At approximately 10:47 a.m., while conducting a sweep of the Cascade River drainage, Flight Medic Chu noticed an anomaly on the helicopter's thermal imaging display. The system showed a large heat signature moving through a snow-covered valley approximately 2 miles northeast of their position. The signature appeared significantly larger than typical wildlife and was moving in an erratic pattern through snow that ground reports indicated was 3 to 4 feet deep. Initial assessment suggested an injured hiker or climber in distress. The figure appeared to be struggling through the deep powder, leaving what looked like a disturbed trail behind it. Radio communications with base confirmed no registered climbing parties in that specific sector, and no emergency beacons were active in the immediate area. Weather conditions were beginning to deteriorate. Cloud cover was moving in from the west, and wind speeds were increasing. Standard protocol would typically call for marking the GPS coordinates and requesting ground-based search and rescue teams. However, given the remote location and the apparent distress of the individual, the crew made the decision to attempt immediate visual contact and possible rescue. This decision would prove to be one they would question for years to come. As helicopter N-47 descended toward the valley floor, the crew began to realize that their initial assessment was dramatically incorrect. Through the aircraft's windows, what they observed defied their collective experience in wilderness rescue operations. The figure moving through the snow stood approximately 8.5 feet tall. Its entire body was covered in dark, matted hair that appeared almost black against the white snow. The creature's build was massive, with shoulders that seemed nearly 4 feet across and arms that hung well below what would be normal proportions for a human being. Ranger Bradley, who had investigated numerous Sasquatch reports during his tenure with the Park Service, immediately recognized the similarities to witness descriptions he had documented over the years. The creature's gait was distinctly bipedal, but unlike human locomotion. It moved with a rolling motion, each step sinking deep into the snow, but covering remarkable distance with each stride. As the helicopter descended to approximately 200 feet above the valley floor, the crew observed a trail of what appeared to be blood droplets in the snow behind the creature. The crimson spots were clearly visible against the white backdrop, suggesting the being was indeed injured. The blood trail extended back through the forest for several hundred yards, indicating the creature had been traveling in this condition for some time. The sound of the helicopter's rotors appeared to agitate the creature significantly. It stopped its forward progress and turned toward the aircraft, raising what the crew described as an enormous head to look directly at them. At this point, the being's behavior shifted from apparent distress to clear aggression. Moving with surprising speed for something of its size, the creature bent down and grasped a boulder that Bradley estimated to weigh at least 60 pounds. With fluid motion that demonstrated incredible strength and coordination, it hurled the projectile directly at the helicopter. The accuracy of the throw was remarkable. The boulder struck the tail rotor assembly with devastating force, immediately causing severe vibration throughout the aircraft. Pilot Morrison fought to maintain control as warning lights illuminated across the instrument panel. The tail rotor, critical for directional control, had suffered significant damage. Within seconds, Morrison realized that controlled flight was no longer possible. He initiated emergency landing procedures, auto-rotating the aircraft toward a relatively flat area of the valley floor. The helicopter struck the snow with considerable force, the landing skids digging deep into the powder. The main rotor blades struck snow-covered tree branches, causing additional damage, but the crew compartment remained intact. All 3 crew members survived the impact with only minor injuries. Chu sustained a mild concussion and lacerations to her forehead from loose equipment. Bradley suffered bruised ribs from his safety harness, and Morrison experienced minor whiplash. However, their aircraft was completely disabled, and they found themselves stranded in a remote valley with a creature of unknown intentions somewhere in the immediate vicinity. The immediate priority was establishing communication with their base station. Morrison activated the emergency locator beacon, while Chu assessed the crew's medical condition and Bradley conducted a security perimeter check around the crash site. The distress signal indicated their position, but weather conditions meant rescue operations would likely be delayed by 4 to 6 hours. During his perimeter check, Bradley made a discovery that would haunt him for years. The blood trail they had observed from the air continued past their crash site, leading deeper into the forest. More significantly, he found footprints in the snow that measured approximately 18 inches in length and 7 inches in width. The depth of the impressions suggested something weighing between 600 and 800 pounds. Against standard emergency protocol, which called for remaining with the aircraft until rescue arrived, the crew made the decision to follow the trail. Bradley argued that documenting the creature's path might provide valuable evidence, while Chu was concerned about the extent of its injuries based on the amount of blood they were observing. The trail led them through dense forest for approximately half a mile. The blood drops became more frequent, and the footprints showed signs that the creature was favoring its left side. Broken branches at heights of 7 to 8 feet indicated the being's passage through areas where humans would need to duck or crawl. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of a cliff face that dropped approximately 150 feet to a rocky stream bed below. The blood trail stopped at the cliff's edge, but there was no body visible in the ravine below. The crew spent nearly an hour searching the area and examining the cliff face for any sign of where the creature might have gone, but found no additional evidence. When the search and rescue team arrived at 4:23 p.m., they extracted the crew without incident and documented the crash site. A second investigative team was dispatched the following day to examine the blood trail and footprint evidence. Their report confirmed the presence of both blood samples and large footprints, but noted that no creature was located despite an extensive search of the area. During the mandatory debriefing process, the crew's account of their encounter was met with skepticism from supervisory personnel. The official position was that the stress of the emergency landing had caused the crew to misinterpret what they had observed. The creature they described was dismissed as likely being a large bear standing on its hind legs, and the accuracy of the thrown boulder was attributed to coincidence rather than deliberate action. Photographs of the footprints and blood samples were taken by the investigative team, but the results of laboratory analysis were classified and never released to the crew. Multiple requests for information under the Freedom of Information Act were denied on grounds of ongoing investigation. The official incident report attributed the helicopter crash to mechanical failure of the tail rotor assembly, making no mention of the boulder impact or the creature encounter. Insurance claims were processed based on this mechanical failure determination. The psychological impact on the crew was significant. All 3 members underwent mandatory counseling sessions, and their accounts remained consistent throughout multiple interviews. However, the official dismissal of their experience created lasting professional and personal consequences. Ranger Bradley requested transfer to a different district within 6 months of the incident, citing his inability to continue working in an area where his professional observations were not taken seriously. Flight Medic Chu left wilderness rescue work entirely, accepting a position with an urban emergency medical service. Pilot Morrison continued flying like nothing happened. The case remains officially closed, but questions persist about what really happened in that remote valley on February 14, 2019, and whether the truth about the encounter will ever be fully acknowledged. Through another wilderness hundreds of miles away, where a lone hunter in the Bitterroots would learn that sometimes the thing watching from the trees isn't hunting food. Marcus Velez had been hunting these mountains for over 20 years. At 44, the Missoula native knew the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness like his own backyard. The remote section he'd chosen for this October hunt was notorious for producing trophy elk, but it required a 3-hour hike from the nearest trail access. Most hunters avoided the area due to its isolation, which made it perfect for someone seeking solitude and big game. His satellite phone buzzed as he secured the final strap on his tree stand, 15 feet above the forest floor. The device was his lifeline to civilization, capable of sending messages and making calls, even in the deepest wilderness. Marcus had invested in the technology after his wife Sarah insisted on emergency communication during his solo hunts. He texted Sarah at 4:30 p.m. on October 12, 2016. Setup complete. Stand is solid, weather looks good. This spot has fresh elk sign everywhere. Should have meat in the freezer by Sunday. The first evening passed without incident. Marcus settled into his elevated position as darkness crept through the towering pines. His voice message to Sarah that night reflected his optimism. He told her that the first day had gone smoothly, that he'd seen a few does, but was waiting for a larger buck. The weather, he said, was perfect, and he felt confident about the morning hunt. He ended the message by telling her he loved her. But the second night brought changes that would haunt the investigation for years to come. Marcus's voice message to his brother Jake, recorded at 11:47 p.m., carried a different tone entirely. The confident hunter now sounded uncertain, almost confused. He explained that something strange was happening near his stand. Heavy footsteps circling below him, too deliberate to be random. Each time he aimed his light downward, the sound stopped. When he turned it off, it started again. He said he'd hunted for decades and never heard anything like it. He mentioned it was probably a bear, but admitted the pattern felt wrong, almost as if whatever was down there knew exactly where he was. The next morning brought no relief. Marcus's text to his hunting partner Tom showed his growing unease. He wrote that the forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. As if every animal had vanished overnight. He admitted he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him, and that the hair on the back of his neck had been standing up since dawn. By the second night, Marcus's communications took on a desperate quality. His voice message to Jake, time-stamped 1:23 a.m., captured audio that would later become central to the investigation. Marcus's next message to his brother was strained and urgent. He said something was moving around below his tree stand, not a bear or an elk, pacing in circles for nearly an hour. The noises it made were unlike anything he recognized, a deep, throaty mix between a growl and a whistle. He explained that he was recording the sounds so his brother could hear them for himself. The satellite phone's memory contained a 3-minute audio file from that night. The recording captured Marcus's labored breathing, the creak of his tree stand, and underneath it all, a series of vocalizations that defied easy classification. The sounds were rhythmic, almost conversational, as if something was attempting to communicate. Wildlife experts who later analyzed the audio could not identify the source, noting that the vocalizations contained frequencies both higher and lower than any known North American predator. By the third day, Marcus's messages showed a clear shift. The calm, methodical hunter was unraveling. His final unsent text to Tom, likely blocked by weak satellite signal, described massive handprints pressed into the bark of his tree, each one larger than his by several inches. Deep gouges marked the trunk beneath them, as if made by clawed fingers. He wrote that he planned to stay in the stand through the day and wouldn't climb down until full daylight returned. His draft messages, recovered from the phone's memory, revealed the full extent of his terror. One unsent text to Sarah described eyes that didn't reflect like those of a normal animal. They were too high off the ground and seemed to move with awareness. He wrote that he believed whatever was out there knew he was trapped in his stand. Another incomplete draft instructed that if anything happened to him, authorities should check the trees around his position for claw marks, warning that it wasn't a normal predator, but something entirely different. The final coherent communication from Marcus came at 6:45 p.m. on October 14th. His voice message to Sarah tried to sound reassuring, though the strain in his tone was unmistakable. He told her he planned to stay in his stand through the night, explaining that he felt safer off the ground and had enough supplies until morning. He ended the message by telling her not to worry if she didn't hear from him until sunrise and that he loved her. At 2:47 a.m. on October 15th, Marcus's satellite phone registered one final activity, a draft text message that was never sent. The message contained only 4 words, "It's watching me now." When Marcus failed to check in at his scheduled 8 a.m. call, Sarah contacted the local sheriff's office. A search and rescue team reached his hunting area by helicopter that afternoon, following GPS coordinates from his last known position. What they found defied explanation. Marcus lay at the base of his tree, his neck broken from the fall. The rope ladder that provided access to his stand hung in tatters, showing deep gouges that appeared to be claw marks. The spacing and depth of the marks suggested something with immense strength had systematically destroyed the ladder, effectively trapping Marcus in his elevated position before somehow bringing him down. The tree trunk bore additional evidence of the struggle. Bark was stripped away in long vertical gouges, as if something had climbed the tree with considerable force. Most disturbing were the handprints Marcus had mentioned in his texts, clear impressions in the soft bark that measured nearly 10 inches from palm to fingertip. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the forensic pathologist who examined Marcus's body, noted several anomalies in her preliminary report. While the cause of death was clearly the fall, the positioning of the body suggested it had been moved after impact. Additionally, Marcus's hunting rifle remained in his stand, fully loaded and unfired, despite his reputation as an expert marksman who never hesitated to defend himself. The official investigation concluded within a week. Sheriff's Deputy Robert Torres filed the final report, listing Marcus's death as an accidental fall during night hunting activities. The report made no mention of the audio recordings, the claw marks on the ladder, or the unexplained handprints on the tree. However, when the 3-minute audio file from Marcus's satellite phone was eventually released, it immediately drew criticism from analysts and skeptics. Audio experts argued that the recorded sounds were inconclusive, possibly a mix of wind distortion, distant animal calls, and microphone interference. Online forums dissected every frequency spike, with some claiming manipulation or pareidolia, while others insisted the tone and rhythm pointed to an unknown vocal source. Sarah's attempts to push for a more thorough investigation met with bureaucratic resistance at every turn. Her requests for information were denied, her calls to state wildlife officials went unreturned, and her hired private investigator was told that the case file had been sealed indefinitely. Other hunters began coming forward with similar experiences in the same area. Tom Rodriguez, Marcus's hunting partner, reported that he had encountered unexplained vocalizations and the sensation of being watched during a hunt in the adjacent valley just 2 weeks before Marcus's death. A group of elk hunters from Spokane described finding large footprints and claw marks on trees throughout the region, evidence they had photographed but were later asked to delete by Forest Service officials. Within 6 months of Marcus's death, the entire section of the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness where he had been hunting was quietly closed to public access. Official notices cited concerns about unstable terrain and wildlife management activities, but no specific timeline for reopening was provided. Today, the area where Marcus died remains off-limits to hunters and hikers alike. The truth of what Marcus encountered in his final hours may never be known, but his case serves as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are deliberately left unsolved and some evidence is too dangerous to be made public. Months after Marcus Velez's death, another night crew would hear the same low sounds rolling across the plains. This time not from the trees, but from the edge of the floodlights, where something waited just beyond their reach. The summer heat of July 2018 hung heavy over the eastern Montana plains, where a remote drilling operation hummed through the night. Miles from the nearest town, the industrial site stood like an alien outpost against the endless grassland. Bill Gray had supervised night shifts for over 15 years, but something about this particular site felt different from the moment they broke ground. The veteran supervisor couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched from beyond the reach of their floodlights. His crew consisted of 3 reliable men, Dave Mando and Miguel Mano, both experienced drill operators who knew their equipment inside and out, and Frank Kitagawa, a security guard whose job was to monitor the perimeter and ensure no unauthorized personnel entered the work zone. According to Bill, the first sign of trouble came on July 17th, when an otherworldly howl echoed across the plains during the midnight hour. The sound was unlike anything the crew had heard before, deeper than a coyote's call, more guttural than a wolf's howl, and carrying an almost human quality that sent chills down their spines. Frank immediately grabbed his flashlight and swept the darkness beyond the fence line, but found nothing except swaying grass and shadows. Bill suggested it was probably just some coyotes fighting over a kill, though his voice lacked conviction. The crew had all worked in remote locations before, and they knew the sounds of prairie wildlife. This was something else entirely. Over the next several nights, the howls became a regular occurrence, always between midnight and 3 in the morning. More disturbing was how the sound seemed to be getting closer to the drilling pad with each passing night. What started as distant calls from perhaps a mile away gradually moved to within a few hundred yards of their operation. The crew found themselves constantly glancing toward the darkness, their nerves fraying with each shift. The industrial lighting that had once provided comfort now seemed inadequate, creating stark contrasts between the harshly illuminated work area and the impenetrable blackness beyond. The drilling equipment's constant noise, which usually provided a comforting backdrop of familiar sounds, now seemed to mask potential threats approaching from the prairie. Dave Mando was the first to capture concrete evidence of their mysterious visitor. On the night of July 23rd, he was returning from a supply run to town when his vehicle's dash cam recorded something extraordinary. As his headlights swept across a small rise about 200 yards from the drilling pad, 2 glowing eyes reflected back at him from the darkness. But these weren't the typical green or yellow reflections of deer or cattle. These eyes glowed with an amber intensity and were positioned far too high off the ground. When Dave reviewed the footage the next morning, the crew gathered around his laptop in stunned silence. The eyes appeared to be approximately 7 feet off the ground, far higher than any known wildlife in the region. More unsettling was their spacing. They were set wide apart, suggesting a creature with a massive skull. The reflection lasted only a few seconds before whatever was out there moved away from the headlight beam, but the image was burned into their memories. Miguel suggested it could be a moose. Frank shook his head and replied that moose didn't live out there, and he'd never seen moose eyes glow like that. The crew's unease deepened when they discovered evidence of sabotage the following morning. One of the fuel lines feeding the main generator had been ripped open during the night, causing a significant diesel spill. But this wasn't the clean cut of a knife or saw. The heavy rubber hose had been torn apart with tremendous force, leaving jagged edges that suggested incredible strength. Bill immediately contacted the drilling company's security department, and within 2 days, additional cameras were installed around the perimeter of the operation. The new surveillance system included infrared capabilities and motion sensors, creating a comprehensive monitoring network that should have captured any intruder, human or otherwise. The enhanced security measures paid off on July 28th, when the cameras recorded their most compelling evidence yet. At exactly 2:13 a.m., motion sensors triggered the recording system as a large, dark figure crossed the service road approximately 100 yards from the drilling pad. The creature moved with a fluid, bipedal gait that was distinctly non-human, yet clearly intelligent and purposeful. Using a parked maintenance truck as a scale reference, the crew estimated the creature's height at over 6 feet, with shoulders that appeared level with the truck's cab. The figure was covered in dark hair or fur and moved with surprising speed across the illuminated area before disappearing into the darkness on the far side of the road. The entire sequence lasted less than 10 seconds, but it provided undeniable proof that something large and unknown was stalking their operation. Despite the compelling video evidence, the response from wildlife officials was dismissive and frustrating. According to authorities, a state biologist examined the footage and quickly concluded that the crew had simply recorded a large moose that had wandered onto the site. Her official report stated that the lighting conditions and camera angle had created an optical illusion that made the animal appear larger and more humanoid than it actually was. The crew's reaction to this explanation was one of incredulous anger. These were experienced outdoorsmen who had worked in remote locations across the western United States. They knew the difference between a moose and whatever they had encountered on the Montana plains. Bill Gray had 30 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, while Dave and Miguel had grown up hunting and fishing in similar terrain. Their collective expertise was being dismissed by someone who had never set foot on their site. The psychological impact on the night shift crew was becoming increasingly severe. What had once been a routine assignment had transformed into a nightly ordeal of tension and fear. Productivity dropped as the workers found themselves constantly distracted by sounds from the darkness beyond their lights. Equipment operators made mistakes they would never have made under normal circumstances, and the overall efficiency of the operation suffered dramatically. Additional incidents continued to plague the site throughout early August. Heavy equipment was found, moved from where it had been parked the previous evening, despite being secured with wheel locks and parking brakes. Strange, musky odors would occasionally drift across the work area, unlike anything the crew had encountered before. Most disturbing were the sounds of metal being manipulated somewhere in the darkness, creaking, scraping noises that suggested their mysterious visitor was examining or testing their equipment. The breaking point came during a shift change on August 8th, when the creature made its closest approach yet to the drilling operation. According to Frank Kitagawa, he was conducting his routine perimeter check when he spotted a massive figure standing motionless near the equipment yard, less than 50 yards from the main drilling platform. For several terrifying minutes, man and creature observed each other across the industrial landscape. Frank later described the encounter as the most frightening experience of his life. The creature stood upright like a human, but was covered in dark, shaggy hair and possessed proportions that were clearly non-human. Its eyes reflected the industrial lighting, which was both fascinating and terrifying. When Frank finally moved to alert the rest of the crew, the creature simply melted back into the darkness with surprising stealth for something so large. Within 1 week of this close encounter, the entire night shift crew had submitted their resignations. Bill Gray, despite his years of experience and professional reputation, refused to spend another night on the site. Dave and Miguel found positions with other drilling companies, while Frank Kitagawa left the security industry entirely. The mass exodus of experienced personnel effectively shut down the night operation. The drilling company's response was swift and comprehensive, though not in the way the crew had hoped. Rather than investigating the mysterious encounters, corporate management suspended the entire operation, citing unspecified equipment issues and safety concerns. All security footage was confiscated by company representatives. However, someone within the organization leaked portions of the dashcam and security camera footage to online forums dedicated to unexplained phenomena. The grainy videos quickly went viral, sparking intense debate among believers and skeptics alike. Some viewers were convinced the footage showed definitive proof of an unknown species, while others maintained that the images could be explained by conventional wildlife or even elaborate hoaxes. The drilling site remains abandoned to this day, its equipment removed, and the access roads gradually being reclaimed by prairie grass. Occasional reports of similar sightings continue to emerge from the surrounding area, though none have been as well documented as the events of July and August 2018. Thanks for watching. Like these stories? Click here for more.